We kick off the 30s with the genius behind Nosferatu and his swing at romance. We're talking F.W. Murnau and his beautiful film, City Girl. City Girl is a poignant and visually stunning film that explores the clash between rural simplicity and urban complexity. At the heart of this story is Lem Tustine, a young farmer who travels to Chicago to sell his family's wheat crop. While he's there, he falls in love with a girl named Kate, a spirited waitress. And as their whirlwind romance leads to marriage, the couple finds unexpected challenges along the way. When they return to Lem's family farm, they navigate to the disapproval of Lem's stern father and the harsh realities of farm life. Their love and resilience are definitely put to the test in this film. Join us as we discuss the film's rich themes, Murnau's masterful direction, and the enduring relevance of this tale of love, conflict, and perseverance. Stay tuned as we journey back to 1930 and uncover the brilliance of City Girl. Reached the 1930s. We changed a chapter, and here we are in a new decade. Now we've drafted our first movie, and that movie is City Girl. Release date, February 16th, 1930. Tagline is, a Chicago waitress falls in love with a Minnesota farmer and decides to face a life in the country. Who better than a German to tell that story, huh? Directed by F.W. Murnau. Distributed by Fox Film Corporation. Runtime, 1 hour and 28 minutes. Finally, starring Charles Farrell, who played Lem Tustine and Mary Duncan. Will, give me your fill-in-the-blank word and your instant reactions to City Girl.
Yeah, fill-in-the-blank word, I guess, would be, maybe I'll go instant reaction first, because I don't have one of those fill-in-the-blanks. Instant reaction, I was pretty impressed with this. I think it's a good start to 1930. Like a theme is kind of presenting over the last few films, the first two acts are really good, and it's that third act that kind of doesn't work for me as well as I had hoped. But I think this one belonged on our list because there's a lot of good stuff here.
That's interesting that you said that, because my fill in the blank word, Will, is complete. Because although, again, I think there's some character issues, when we're looking at character motivations and would they, wouldn't they type thing, I felt like story-wise, we actually got a complete movie. I felt like for the first time we had a director that kind of, crossed his T's and dotted his I's, and I felt like for the most part we got a complete story. So my fill-in-the-blank word was complete. My instant reaction was I really enjoyed it in the sense of like, it was a romance, we got all the same things that you would get in modern day romances. You get the chase scene, you get the I can't do this, let's, try to salvage your original lifestyle. No, I must have you. There's all these great things and plots or plot lines that are at play. I really enjoyed the movie. I thought I was really happy that you got to see an F.W. Murnau film. I say that like I'm a huge historian of his. This is only the second film of his I've ever seen, but I just think it's important since we didn't do Nosferatu, right? It was important for you to realize that this guy existed, and not only did he exist, he was kind of like a champion, Will, of silent films, right? So I'm going to hit you with an anecdote here in a little bit, but he really loved the medium of silent films and vehemently hated sound taking over the craft. So, thoughts on that as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, just real quick, I want to maybe walk myself back just a touch, and not. I think complete's a good word. I think what I'm my issue right now is the flimsiness that some of the third act um, relies on. Right, the third act is pretty good, but it seems like the theme that I'm kind of pointing at over the last few films is that um, the thing that happens, the event that happens that drives the third act just feels forced or feels flimsy or feels not thought out well enough. But that's all I was trying to say. I think complete's a good word here. But yeah, I mean, I wonder how much of that, if Murnau is kind of at the end of his career here, how much of that's just a cranky old guy not wanting to go through any more changes, right?
Well,
Because
Well, let
yeah,
me
I
stop you
mean,
there real quick. Let me stop you there real quick. He was a young guy. He just died
oh,
early. He got into a car accident and died. He
let's
was
see.
41, 40, I think
Mm,
39 when he directed this movie. So like it wasn't a cranky old guy. It was just, the way he saw kind of the world. And from my readings, he was really intrigued with American lifestyle. He only made 3
mm.
Hollywood movies out of his 20 plus films. But the fact that he told this simple love story, like I said, a German who somehow is telling the story of a Chicago girl and a Minnesota country guy. Maybe he just viewed us that way. I don't know.
Well, I mean, 1930, you still have some of that immigrant, life. The immigrant life is still at play here. I mean, it's still something to come to the United States and bring your family and find fortune, right? It hasn't died out yet. So I think that's probably a little bit of romanticizing the American dream here. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious too in that the diner scene where she asks what nationality he is. So you must be a Swede, I think is what she says. And
Yeah,
that kind of like, that's not something you ask a lot anymore, right?
yeah, yeah.
Like, what nationality are you? Like, it's just not something we think about quite as much, 100 years later. So,
Sure, fair enough. And from what I read here too, just did a quick research. I guess he was at the end of his career was living in Hollywood or around it,
mm,
Santa Barbara, California. So he had at some point made the transition and became more than just fascinated by American lifestyle. Did become, without the papers, did become American, so to speak. So um, I wanted
and
to mention. Oh, sorry. Go
just to
ahead.
be fair, I'm 36 and I'm kind of a cranky old man. So, I mean,
Okay,
41,
fair enough.
you can be cranky.
I can definitely speak to that, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to talk on something because you and I had a conversation just yesterday, back and forth through text about adapted books to screenplays, right, versus original screenplays to screenplays. Uh, this movie, City Girl, speaking specifically to movies that we've seen so far from this realm, this was an adapted theater. This was an adapted play. I want to ask you before we dive into the book aspect of it. What do you think is either gained or lost when they're pulling a screenplay from an original piece of work that wasn't meant for this medium? Okay, in this case, we're talking The Mud Turtle by Elliot Lester. It was a play, and now they've transitioned it over into a movie. Do we gain something from the play theater world to the movie, or do we lose something, or is it maybe a little bit of both?
Yeah, no, I think there's probably a little bit of both there. Obviously when you're watching a play, you get some dialogue, so you don't have to worry about reading the stills or feeling. I don't know how much of this was kind of present at the time, but it just feels a little wooden when we're watching silent films now because you see the people talking, but then there's a still that comes after, and it all feels a little choppy. You probably lose some of that from the play. You're not gonna, it's not gonna feel as choppy. But one of the things gained here is, I think, some of the incredible shots that we get. Right, like when when the camera is on the combine, kind of watching the men
Oh
at
yeah,
work. I thought
yeah.
that was really well done. And then you get some of the scenes in the diner early on where it's kind of flashing back and forth from being on the floor to being in the background, and just seeing her and her different, the way she's acting in one place versus the other.
The
And
contrast, yeah, the way
yeah,
that she's dealing with customers, but yet somehow dealing with him different with a different attitude. Yeah,
yeah, I think you gain some of that from having, obviously a very skilled director setting up
yeah.
the scenery. So, yeah.
That's an interesting point that I didn't really think about because I was sitting here. when we talk about the books here in a minute, there is a lot that can be lost from book to screen because we just can't compete with our own imaginations, and you can't compete with six, sometimes 700 pages of of dialogue and
Yeah.
imagery, right, in a book. But I thought, man, there's got to be only, surely there must be some things being lost, but like I would feel majority of it would be gained. But in this case, we're talking about a silent film, right? So maybe going to the theater during the silent film era still still was maybe the preferred choice because you do get that dialogue to go along with the emotion and all that. We just don't get and we don't get the camera to sit right here. So you're right. That's a great point that I didn't even really think about, that from silent film era, you know what I mean? That you probably do lose something from play to the movies. So
Yeah.
what's your thoughts on the book? When we start talking adapted screenplays, from an original book idea, I used to be a snob. I used to say, I don't want to say a snob of it, but like to me, it's an obvious thing, right? It's like a film or a movie can't compete with a book in the sense of the amount of details that can be placed inside, that you have to have vivid details because you're trying to set a landscape, right? Where
Yeah.
in a movie, right away, just through the first 15, 20 seconds, whatever they show you on screen kind of helps set those first,
Yeah.
sometimes 3 to 5 pages of a book. Where are you at with books to adapted screenplays to screenplays?
Yeah. I think it can be hit or miss. I think the most successful ones are the ones that can take the book and they can keep the themes kind of alive and well, but do something slightly different. The go to example here, of course, is Fight Club. I mean, I've read the book. I love the book very much, but the book has a lot to do with God, and the movie doesn't. Right, because Fincher wants to take what Chuck Palahniuk was saying in Fight Club, and he wants to say something similar but not exactly the same, right? So he takes something and he adapts it for the screen. I think where you get into trouble is sometimes if you try to adapt something but you don't actually adapt it, you just try to take it literally and you do the thing, and it's just ends up being lesser than, because like you said, when you're reading a book you have your imagination to play with, you have the inner life of the character, and if you just try to just copy and paste, it doesn't work.
See,
So the
that's what
best, yeah,
yeah, I was going to ask you that because unless they make the biography of Hulk Hogan, which I know Hemsworth was making that for Netflix, there's not been a lot of books that I've read that have been transferred over to the screen. So, you know,
yeah,
so I can't really compete or pick nits with those things. But I will say this: you're right. When you do a carbon copy from the book to the screen, or at least try to, you're always going to fall a little bit short in my eyes because there's just so much being left out, right? And I also feel like sometimes it's a lose-lose situation for anybody that tries to do that because people who love books, right, they can be a little bit harder critics when it comes to the movies because they have such high expectations because, again, you're fighting with your own imagination. I also
right,
feel like it's a lose-lose because if they somehow, alter a plot line or a theme, or if they do try to do the carbon copy but yet give you an alternate ending or a different, people get upset about that too. Like they're mad because it's not the same, or because it was the same thing, or they're mad because you gave us your version of it at the end. But again, it's whoever's doing its own piece of art. So
right. Yeah, and I mean, that's the one thing we've talked about this before already. Just you can't. There's no way to make everyone happy, right? Like you just can't. Like you can make something as close to perfect as possible, and there's going to be people that don't like it, and that's how being human works.
yeah,
We just there's too much diversity in thought to really find something uniform for subjective opinions, and that's if it works for the majority of people, then I think you're onto something.
yeah. I mean, if you can, at the end of the day, even if it doesn't work for people, but you feel good about it, I think there's a win there too. You know what I mean? Um, I wanted to talk about the title of this movie. It's called City Girl, and according to research, F.W Murnau really wanted this to be called Our Daily Bread. Fought the studio heads on that, but ultimately they won. And I guess there were some early workings in Europe and whatnot that this was called Our Daily Bread. I believe that was the name of the newspaper or whatnot. And he just thought that was a better fit. I think when I think about City Girl, I mean, I guess it makes sense, but like I kind of tend to think of that tagline that kind of follows. You can take the girl out of the city, but you can't take, or you can take the city, whatever. You know, the girl out of the city, but you can't take the city out of the girl. To me, this was more about like, this was more about Lem being, not able to. You can take the country boy out of the country, but you can't take the boy out of the country type thing.
Yeah.
She was more willing to adapt. She wanted that lifestyle, right? She was very infatuated with Lem and his country style, and was hoping that maybe the guys were going to be different and the way of life was going to be different. Until little, all the way to Minnesota in a different world, somehow things still felt the same. So I just wondered if Country Boy should have been the name of this movie rather than City Girl. But let's dive into some anecdotes real quick before we get to the plot, Will.
All right.
I said this earlier. It's an American silent film, but it was directed by a German filmmaker, F.W Murnau. 82% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 4.0 on Letterboxd. That's pretty good.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Anytime you're flirting with 4 or above on Letterboxd, you're doing something right.
Oh, yeah. When I give a movie a 4, I really, really enjoyed it, right? And when you get an average of 4, like, holy crap. I went on to tell you this. Murnau vehemently refused to add sound to his project, so he quit the movie towards the end. So this is the thing that's interesting. The studio heads wanted to compete with part talkies. Again, when we originally drafted this was supposed to be a part talkie, and I'm watching this movie going, when the hell does someone start talking, right? And according to my readings here, it says that they hired a different director to come in and finish this project. And since that, we're talking 90 some years, I think 40 or 50 years went by. The sound version of this movie has been lost completely. Okay. But they were able to keep the silent film. And I think it was in 1970s, they restored it and put together what we must have watched today, because there were some scenes left out. And again, I'm always going to wonder if it messes with the storyline. But yeah, Will, that's an interesting note there, just to have, the fact that the studio halfway through wanted him to add in part talkies or, a talkie to the movie, and he just refused.
Yeah. Nope. Just more things change, more they stay the same. Sounds like this has been an issue throughout time in Hollywood, where you get a creator that's got something good, but he can't quite get it all the way to the finish line because of outside influences. So
yeah. And I kind of feel like F.W Murnau eventually, as all the greats do, because he is considered to be one of the great ones when in the silent film world, he would have made the adjustments. He was 41 years old. At some point, he would have seen the benefit in having dialogue and adding what that would have added to the film. It just, according to this, he was just stubborn as a mule. The last one I have, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about. The film relies upon stereotypes, prejudices, and entrenched value systems to define character behavior, typical of Murnau, and refuses to view either the city or the country as havens of domestic or romantic harmony. City Girl shows us characters who are in the world, or in both worlds, trying to escape one, seeking haven in another one when it really doesn't exist. I thought that was really an interesting note.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of my notes is the weed isn't always golden or on the other side, right? Like, it's just not. Like, we just have these ideas in our head that there's some form of perfection out there in the world that we can find, and our circumstances here are just never going to be able to be good enough. So we're always thinking about that other side of the fence, and I think this movie is kind of a personification of that.
Where do you think that stems from? Is it just whenever you compare yourself to another lifestyle, or you see something in a magazine or on the internet? Like where does that are we ever truly happy with our current circumstances? I mean, of course we're happy, right? We've created roots and things of that nature, but like, is there always that little bit of doubt that are we doing the thing that's fulfilling us?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't think there's. I think. I mean, there's seven deadly sins, right? And one of them is envy, and that's envy. It's a real thing that we can't always find what we have to be enough. And I think that's part like inherent to human nature. I think probably because for a thousand years, humans were struggling to find resources. So that's part of it. The other part, I think, is American culture. I think there's something about that pursuit of happiness that's real, right? We can't actually be happy. We have to continue to pursue it. And I think there's something being said here by Murnau in placing this in Chicago and Minnesota and saying, "Hey, here, look at this American dream. It can be a little sticky, regardless of what side of the fence you're on."
Or the wheat, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I yeah, I really thought it was fascinating. This is what I meant by complete. I don't know if it was necessarily, well, I guess it would be foreshadowing a little bit, right? He did quite a bit of foreshadowing in this movie. The diner, the fact that she was a waitress, that's how she made her living. And then she's waiting on these very impatient men. And then we get to the kitchen scene later on where the father, Mr. Tustin pulls her out and says that now it's time for her to earn her keep. And there she is again doing this, this life that she thought she had escaped. I just really thought it was complete because we got full circle with a lot of things. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Any comments on that before we dive into the plot, my friend?
No, I think you're right. I think he's a smart filmmaker. That much is for sure.
Well, let's go into the plot. Storyline is this. Charles Farrell, the guy that plays Lem Tustine, a Minnesota wheat farmer's son who has been sent out to the big city to sell this year's crops. He meets and falls in love with a lonely waitress, Mary Duncan, and takes her home to the folks. Upon the arrival, Kate discovers that Lem is controlled by his domineering father. The guy played David Torrance. When I first watched this, I thought the guy resembled the main priest from The Passion of Joan of Arc. I had to go look it up, and it wasn't. So if anybody else had that same thought, it is not the same guy. But
okay.
He goes on to reject her as a gold digger before the moment he meets her. Lem and Kate's relationship further crumbles when a band of rowdy laborers arrive to harvest the crop and begin flirting with the worldly woman whom fate has dropped onto the joyless farm. An approaching hailstorm pushes the workers to their physical limits and puts an emotional strain on the Tustin family that seems destined to break them apart or possibly bind them together forever. That's the plot. That's where we are. Now tell me where you found trouble in the third act, okay? Because I thought that, like you said, I thought the first and second act are pretty strong, right? They're building something. Well, where does the train kind of go off rails? Maybe not completely, but where do you start having issues? Is it plot, or is it again character motivations?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both of those things, right? The character motivations here that I have issues with, well, more like the instantaneous character growth, right? With Pa, right? He just all of a sudden understands that he's been an asshole this whole time, and in my experience, when an asshole is an asshole, they don't realize it that quick. So I had, minor issue there. The other problem I have is just it's just on a snap of a fingers that these laborers decide that they're done, right? And what is it based on? It's based on one guy being disappointed that he can't get the girl, and it's just flimsy. I think the issue that I had, but
No, that's fair because I took issue kind of too with the father is literally shooting a gun at what he believes to be Mac. I think that's the only laborer's name that we got was Mac, the one that was pursuing Kate towards the end of the film. And he doesn't shoot anybody. He shoots out the light, but then he ultimately has like this moment where he believes he shot his son, right? And it's not until Lem shows up and realizes that he didn't shoot Lem that he has this like great epiphany of like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for what I've done. And I put you through hell. And then Lem mentions, you put my life and my wife through hell. Please make it right. So he does that. Okay, that's one thing. Maybe that's a huge stretch and reach because you said but I'm willing to go there with you. Okay, you go to take a man's life. You think it's your son. You have a big moment. I'm with you.
Mhm.
Why in the hell would the laborers go back to work? That part I'm with. Like it might be minor, but like you shoot at me and try to stop me, whatever my motivations are to leave your farm, and you shoot at me or any of my buddies. Like,
Yeah.
no, I ain't going back to work for you. So
Yeah.
that's kind of
It,
where I was at with it. Like some of those things, just like, okay, well, it's complete, but it's not
yeah.
necessarily perfect.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they realized double time was actually a good idea. That's all I got for you.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I think a lot of times this is just where it's like I wonder if there's a lot of questions, right? At what point did Murnau leave the shooting of this? At what point, you know, did the new director come in and kind of have his way, and what was missed out or what wasn't? And if this is just if everything we see up to this point is F.W. Murnau, and they talked about the writers on this, like, is this a writing problem? Sometimes I kind of give screenplays only to the director when there might be a separate writer. Did you look that up? Is there a separate writer than there is director on this?
I didn't look that up on this one. And I'm hesitant to do that because my internet's being choppy out here
No, I
today.
got it. So right here,
Okay.
written by Marion Orth and Berthold Viertel. Yeah, so this isn't even written by F.W. Murnau. So let me ask you this question: if you're a director and you like the screenplay, right? If it gets to final edit and it gets to screens for audiences to see, it no longer, in my opinion, is no longer a writer's issue, right?
Mm.
It's a director's issue, or are we kind of stuck by the politics of everything? Writers
Yeah, and
wrote, you got to take it as is.
yeah, that's a really good question, and I think maybe it's hard to answer for this movie in this time period because it kind of seems to me like as we've been looking through movies from the 1920s and then kind of looking forward at what we will be watching, writing can sometimes the writing credits are not always. Sometimes you have like musical people in there, like sometimes you have um sometimes you just have like who wrote the book, and I wonder how much of like the screenplay was kind of not quite a thing yet, if that makes sense. Like if maybe we're and maybe somebody watching this knows the history a little bit better here, but I'm curious about that question about how much is the screenplay a factor in movies at this time. Because what I'm curious about is like, are they kind of doing some of this on the fly? Are they, you know, writing as they go? Like, because that's what it feels like in a lot of these, the endings. They can't quite figure out what to do to get to the ending, so this gets a little choppy. But
Yeah, no, and I just did a quick research just because I was curious of your thought. It says the first true screenplay, and again, this is one of the earlier works movies that I did see. The first true screenplay is thought to be from George Méliès' 1902 film, A Trip to the Moon. So,
hmm,
we're talking 26 years later, and it says here the movie was silent, but the screenplay still contains specific descriptions and action lines that resemble a modern day script. So I wonder if you're talking 20 some years later, if the screenplay is a little bit more advanced than we're giving it credit for, or if it was only done by certain studios and certain directors or certain writers. You know what I mean?
yeah, and I also wonder like if you I don't know how many screenplays you've read. I've read just a couple, but like now they're pretty descriptive. They've got all the dialogue there. They've got. I just wonder like if a screenplay at this time was more like an outline of
Yeah,
the film,
yeah,
and
especially for a
like
silent film, right? Yeah,
yeah. So it just makes me wonder like what the writers are doing. Like I think it seems to me that the director would probably have more control than what we see now, at least in the majority as a general claim. There's the famous directors who have a lot of control, but um,
Yeah, because a lot of times, especially on TV shows, right? So a lot of times the writers are there in the room with them, right? And they're like, even an actor might say, "Hey, this line doesn't feel like something my character would say," and there's that back and forth between the director and them. And then they have a writer there, and they work on it and they change it in real time, right? Movie might
Yeah.
be a little bit more difficult, or maybe not. Maybe it's a lot easier because you don't have a deadline of having to get it out by next week or so. Not so maybe you have these writers right there in real time. So I guess I would kind of, and answering my own question, I would fall that if anything gets to a screen, it feels like a director's issue. So
Yeah.
um, just wanted to kind of work that out with you, brainstorm it.
Yeah.
Let's talk Act One. What was some of your favorite things from Act One? And I would say anything from the beginning of the movie up until when they both kind of get to the farm.
Yeah.
Would you say that that's Act One?
Yeah, I think so. Probably, I mean, if we're really trying to pin it down, it's probably right before the farm. The farm is probably beginning of Act Two.
Beginning of
Um,
Act Two? Yeah, sure.
yeah. So, I think Murnau sets a really good tone, kind of off the rip. On the train, we understand who Lem is, right? And it was really important because he's not interested in the girl on the train. He doesn't know her motivations, but he's taking that kind of what Mama said, right, pretty seriously. The don't
Mama said, "Don't talk strangers on the train."
exactly, and but it's important because that's how drawn he is to Kate at the diner, because we see who Lem is, and he's still at the diner is drawn to Kate. So I thought that was a really important tone setting. I also, some foreshadowing here that isn't obvious in the beginning is all of the men at the diner that are just, treating Kate like she's, a piece of meat
Piece of
for
meat.
him. And that was really important because we think with the transition to the country, that's going to go away. And as we find out later, it doesn't. So it was really, I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, I did too. I really enjoyed. There's so little details about this movie that I really enjoyed. I might be the only one in the world that thought her little studio apartment was actually cool. Um,
Mm,
maybe I know the idea of it was kind of to show us like her. I don't want to say down on her luck,
mm,
but just like her very much entrenched into a city apartment, right? She's got the
yeah.
subway that goes by. And I mean, as close as it possibly can be. You stick your
Mhm,
finger out the door or the window, you're going to get a hit. It's got the marquee sign in the background, right? You're not going to get that in a country skyline.
mhm.
So I thought that even that was really cool. I thought, man, what a cool place to live. And maybe that was just the point, was just to kind of showcase that this is just a, you know, rather than a girl down on her luck, but more of just like a, you know, an apartment in the city. So
Right.
I really enjoyed little details that he used, and even the fortune, right?
Mm,
How he continues to come back to that throughout the movie.
right.
I really enjoyed some of the details, the way he did the little things.
Yeah. And then the the um, the billboards got enjoy the Minnesota lakes, or the Minnesota whatever creeks or something, like the Minnesota rivers, whatever it says on the billboard. It's just interesting foreshadowing there.
I
Um,
did not pick up on that. That is interesting foreshadowing. Yeah.
yeah,
Did not pick up on that at all. Um, After Act One, we kind of get into Act Two, which would probably go up until what? The hailstorm, and then when he asked the men, I mean, that's kind of that area, pinpointing it down probably a little bit before maybe. Um, when Lem tries to go back in there and rekindle the love with with Kate, and it doesn't work out successfully, and he works his way back up to the loft. There's the issues there between him and Mac, and then right after that is when the father reads the newspaper that says that there's a hailstorm that's just killing wheat fields, and he wants these guys to work overtime. So before we get to that point, let's talk Act Two. The things that we liked about it, didn't like about it, maybe, or do you believe that the movie is still kind of intact as a whole here?
yeah. No, I still think everything's working pretty well here. We get a pretty quick glimpse into Pa's authoritarian handling of his household.
Yeah.
We understand maybe a little bit why Lem is a little fearful of his father, and we kind of get this an inkling of what Kate might be um, thinking about her decision, right? About how this is not a very good start to her time on the farm. So
Yeah, and a couple things come to mind. First would be, how can someone like Lem, does it make sense that he would be the way he is as a human being, like this gentleman, this person of virtue, with his father being so strict? Does that make sense? Do we get a sense that his father's been strict, or if he's just stressing over the means to an end, that is the money to the job that he does? Like, what's your sense on? I know it's a little bit of a character, development with the father, but like, what's your sense on
yeah.
whether or not Lem would be the way he is, with his father being the way he is?
that's a good point. Maybe it's a little minor flaw with the movie. Um, but I think everyone kind of handles those types of situations a little bit differently. So, someone like Lem who maybe his father's never been violent with him. Maybe he's only ever been violent with women because we see him earlier kind of threaten to whip the daughter,
The
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 young girl
the
in the movie. So
Yeah.
yeah, so you wonder, like, maybe Lem's the type that sees this and thinks it's wrong, so he wants to be different. There's the others that see it and they don't think anything of it, and they end up being just like their father. So I think it could be a little bit of a flaw here, not thought out, but he could just be the guy who doesn't want to be like dad.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this part of the movie too is, like, this is the moment everything goes sideways between Lem and Kate, right? So
Mhm.
they're not even in the house 30 seconds, it seems like, or at least the interaction with the father, and there's already an issue. And what's interesting is, we talked about foreshadowing a little bit earlier, maybe with the foreshadowing of the violence, right? So the client or the customer at the diner who got a little bit handsy with Kate, he's very physical and kind of sticking up
Sure.
for her, protecting her, and that's what draws Kate to Lem, amongst other things. But this is like the thing that kind of really solidified it for her. Now we fast forward to this interaction between Kate and his father, and maybe it's a little unfair. Well, after you see what he did, but maybe it's a little unfair to ask him to strike his father, but definitely some semblance of sticking up for her is all she's asking for there, and it doesn't ever happen.
Right.
Did you get the fact that it had to be a violent retribution, and that's the only thing she would have settled for? Or because he never really got the violent retribution, she never really gets the violent, act that she looks for. He never fights his father, but yet they do,
Mhm.
reconcile the relationship in the end of Act 3. So
Yeah. Well, no, I think that's the major falling out between the two of them is that Lem doesn't act on it at all. He just
yeah,
lets it happen. And I mean, that's if you're going to let it happen the first time, you're probably not going to let it happen the second, or you're probably going to keep letting it happen rather. So I think she might be seeing kind of a one time is not a trend, but when it comes to violence, it often can be a precursor. So I think that's what she's seeing there and is worried about.
yeah, and I really like the scene between the father and Kate, to be honest with you, because what I like about it is we get this domineering father, like you spoke about, but then we really get to see the city girl in Kate. She pushes the rocking chair or the chair out of the way. She sticks up for herself. She bites the arm. She's fighting back. She's got that city girl in her that takes no crap from anybody, let alone you know her new husband's father. And she sticks up
Right.
for herself. So I think because she did that, she was looking for that same thing from Lem. Again, how long are we supposed to believe these two have known each other before they got
Yeah.
married, and now they're here?
Yeah, I mean, if you take it in real time, it's 2 days.
Yeah.
But maybe there's a little bit more time there that we're supposed to think has passed. I don't know. It's a
Are we?
week at least. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not sure because he sells. The only indicator that maybe a couple days have gone by is like we were at $1.14 per bushel, and then
Hmm.
somehow he sold at $1.12, but that could have fell the next day. I mean, who knows? Who knows how long they've actually? I mean, this whole thing took place over 3 or 4 days. This movie did. So, what is it? The reason for that? Is it just the not understanding how to be creative with silent filmmaking? We even had this issue with our dancing daughters with the way that they told their story. It felt like only a few days have gone by.
Yeah, I wonder if part of this is, just being intelligent movie watchers now. Like, I think the majority of people who watch movies and watch TV shows now are a lot smarter than they were before, and they ask these types of questions. Whereas, it seems to be in the movies we've been watching, there isn't as much like concern with this idea of time. And maybe that's just because it doesn't matter at this point in the filmmaking. Um, but at the same time, maybe that's not a good enough excuse. Um,
No, I feel like there's something there. Also, I wonder too, like, how long does something have to be around before somebody becomes a historian of it, right? Like, we're not
hmm,
necessarily historians, but like we're striving to be in some way, right? Do we have to have 100 years of something before somebody can jump on and be a historian of it? Or like how much time does need to pass? Because maybe during this time there wasn't people, critically analyzing film or cinema to the point in which we are. So maybe these questions really never get brought up because they're just taking everything as face value because it's supposed to just be a form of entertainment and not so much for, look through the scope of this like critical analysis. I don't know. I feel like there's always been critics around, even during like P.T. Barnum's, phase. Like we learned that in the movie The Greatest Showman. If so, I
yeah.
just don't know. I don't know how long does something have to be around before you do start asking critical questions of something.
Yeah, well, I mean, what questions are the critics asking too? I think is important. When does this idea of like timeline start to matter so much? Because I mean, now you can watch something and go online and you can find 10 people asking a question about like what happened in this scene and why it didn't work, right? And
Yeah,
but back then I just don't think that it was looked at the same way with the same like microscope,
yeah.
which is why we keep seeing the issues with time in our stories.
Yeah, all the guys, that what would have been the water cooler gathering in
Mm.
1930? You know what I mean? Like would have been the barber shop, those types of the pool hall. Gentlemen, I really enjoyed that movie, but when they were only known each other for 3 days and married, and now they have issues, it just didn't work for me. What'd you guys think? By the way,
Yeah.
eight ball in the corner pocket. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
uh, anything else you want to talk about when it comes to Act Two before we dive into just a quick overhaul of Act Three again before we move on to character development?
I thought setting the kind of the whole reaping of the crop I thought was really well done. The the scene with the I mentioned it already, but the scene with the camera on the the old timey uh, combine, I
Yeah,
thought
how about that
was really,
thing?
yeah, all those horses, man, that was interesting. But no, I
Dude,
thought
I've
that
never
was
seen
really
anything like that before. It made me wonder, like, you'd lose half your damn day just trying to wrangle all these horses and put them in line and order because you can't just leave them there like that the next day. You got to
right.
let them go free.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I thought that was really well done. I thought the scene when the laborers first get there is actually kind of funny. Like they're all like getting dolled up,
Yeah,
and the guy with the mirror and like trying to slick his hair back. It's like, dude, no matter how many times you look at that mirror, it's not getting better.
yeah.
Um, but like I thought that before we understand how creepy these guys are. I thought that was kind of a funny scene. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
that
like
was
when
really
does
good.
when does locker room talk turn creepy, right? Like, because they're all like, oh, they're all, Craig used to do it in the movie theater. You see a naked girl on screen, and you just nudge you a little bit. That's
Sure.
fun, innocent stuff. It's when you start approaching these women with like, lust in your eyes and your hands out like this, and you don't stop
Yep.
yourself. That's when it turns creepy. So,
Yeah.
um, no, I agree. I really did like. First of all, I just like the way he used outdoors. Like this outdoors is done a lot in this movie. And I guess it could have been done in a studio, but when I read, it sounds like everything it was on they built a farm out in the middle of Oregon. So this was definitely done outside, at least in some aspect. So,
Yep.
um, Act 3, we talked about a lot of the issues with it, whether it be story, plot, or character motivations. If it's character motivations, if you're an actor or an actress, at that point, do you have much of a say in a studio driven world to kind of say, hey, would my character do this? Or do you think just that stuff didn't happen and it was more about just the director and the studio because they were more of the thing pushing the sales of these things?
Yeah, I wonder if there's maybe a handful of actors and actresses at this time that maybe have a little sway. But Mary, is it Dunine and Charles Farrell? I was looking at
Duncan,
their
Mary Duncan.
Duncan. Okay, that's bad handwriting on my part. They both have a filmography, but it doesn't seem like they're A-list actor and actress at this time. So you just wonder about like how much sway you have trying to keep your place in the hierarchy. So you don't say too much. So I can't imagine. And also maybe at this time we're still not fully developed this idea of like the actor and actress um, as artists, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if that's not really their concern at this time. It's more about just having a job and having fun at a job.
Yeah, it's like when do we get to the point where the actor and actress, the studio realizes that they're the selling point of these things. They can make bad movies and put these people in there, and people are still going to go watch them. It's like when do we get there? I think we're coming up on it fairly soon, to be honest
Getting
with you.
close.
But yeah, let's talk about the casting and the character development here a little bit. We've already talked about Mary Duncan and Charles Farrell. Those are the two that played they're the marquee names here. Mary Duncan only acted for 6 years, and it seems that she really did struggle for whatever reason, finding and landing work, that she altered her looks a couple times, got a nose job, stuff like that, hoping it would land her more gigs. Outside of this role and another role that would happen in, I think, night 33 or 32. I think it was 33 with Katharine Hepburn was like her two big breaks. And then she disappeared. Now, prior to that, she was a stage actress, Will.
Mm.
Even as early as a child, she was a child stage actress, and she did that for a long time. So, as far as her film roles, only made 11 movies, and over a span of 6 years. Now, Charles Farrell, he spans a wide variety of movies here. And he also had his own TV shows. He's actually got two different Hollywood Walk of Fame stars.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting, yeah. One for TV and one for film. So I think in early day Hollywood, he might have had a little bit more of a clout than we might give him credit for. But like, it even says here that he became a mayor of some city in 1940. So like he wasn't as big into films and TV. I think outside of 1940.
I see.
So when we get to character development, who of these two do you think? Is there an issue with kind of the backstory of both of these people? Do you kind of buy who they are? Because I really enjoyed Mary Duncan's performance. I found it
Yeah.
kind of odd that she was struggling to get work.
Yeah. No, I think this movie is I think it's Kate's movie, right? I think the she ends up outstaging the Lem's character, not just because of her performance, but because the movie kind of ends up being about her and what she wants and Lem coming to terms with what she needs. And yeah, so I think this movie is definitely geared towards her. So, which becomes an issue because Lem is still really important, and I feel like we don't quite get um, enough of what he's going through and the decisions he's making and why he's making them. So
Yeah, I think the only issues that I have with, and maybe it's a story issue, it tends to blur the lines with me. Um, I think it is a story issue, is that I want to see them on screen. I thought early on, Act One, I was like, well, I genuinely buy the chemistry here. You know what I mean?
sure.
It was really actually really refreshing to see a gentleman man on TV or on the screen that we, didn't hate. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't anything to hate about Lem Tustine. Maybe he was a little cowardly for sure, but he was a respectful human being. Where we kind of have our, we've blatantly had so many bad guys and shoved in our face. I don't think we've had anybody this likable since maybe Charlie Chaplin.
Sure.
So, and there's a lot of parallels here. It was a romance, so there's those things. But no, I just felt like I wanted to see those two on screen enjoying each other's company just a little bit more than I got before we got to this strife. Because it felt like once the strife happened, they almost weren't even on screen together that often.
Yeah, and maybe some of that's a little bit intentional, right? To kind of give you the two characters together in their, you know, the scenes at the diner are really good, right? Because we've all been in that situation where maybe it's not love at first sight, but you're attracted to someone and you're trying to figure out like the right in or the right thing to say, and you don't want to say the wrong thing because you don't want them to like become disinterested, but those scenes were done really well, and the best part of the movie. So when you take the two people apart, maybe that's what the director wanted to do here, but I think you're right, it hurts the movie because it takes away the best part of the movie is them interacting together. So
Yeah, it does. Um, so is that if it's done on purpose? I guess that's a director's choice,
yeah.
or maybe just for the purpose of the story. Anything else that you felt either helped or hurt the movie based upon character casting, based upon I'll give you an example of casting. I just watched, I think we talked about this last week on the episode, but like Civil War.
Hmm.
There's always something when I see a casting issue, it's so glaring to me that I have a hard time getting past it until I finally settle into the movie. So I thought the young lady that played one of the photographers in the movie Civil War, she was supposed to be 22. She looked 14 to me. Like she looked very, very young. I didn't buy it. Give you another casting. I love Shia LaBeouf. He's one of my favorite actors. I thought he was miscasted in oh man, what was that movie? I can't believe this movie's Wall Street, in the second Wall Street.
Yeah.
He was supposed to be this like hot shot, had already kind of been up and coming lawyer type thing. Or what was he, a lawyer, or was he he was a broker, thank you. He was supposed to be like 28, 30, but he looked
Hmm.
22, 23. It just, that stuff is glaring to me. I don't know. Did you have any issues with any of the characters or casting?
Um, no, I don't think so. The only thing that I thought was weird and it didn't really stand out when I was watching the movie is it seems like this should be about 20-year-olds or 22-year-olds, right? Because Lem is supposed to be a young man, but both of them are in their 30s when this movie gets made, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, there's a little bit of that, right, where it kind of feels maybe like a stretch that this would be happening. And Lem, if Lem's in his 30s, is he really this deferential to his father? Like I don't know. There's a little bit of that there. I don't think it ruins it for me, but it's there.
Yeah, and if he is, I'm not saying he is, but if he is, would he really be that green when it comes to selling the wheat? You know what I mean?
Mm,
For the price, it's like they made it sound like this is one of his first times going out and doing that. Yeah, so you're right. That would be an issue if you were to look at it through that scope. Uh,
yeah.
let's talk F.W. Murnau a little bit.
Okay.
Just the way did you see the way he played with shadows?
Not as it wasn't as obvious to me as some of the other stuff we saw with King Vidor and like
Oh
Hallelujah.
yeah. Oh yeah.
But no, I think he really he did a. I didn't notice anything like glaring where I was like asking questions like why did he do that? Like that was a weird choice. But I guess maybe I didn't. It didn't stand out to me like King Vidor.
I think the only reason I noticed it is because again, Nosferatu is his most famous piece of work,
Mm,
and it just the contrast that he used, with the shadows and the way he told the stories and told that story. I wanted to see how he would use that here, and maybe I was looking for it a little bit more than maybe you were, but there was nothing that was like big that would help the story. I just like the way it pops off my screen. You know what I mean? He did a lot with lanterns. He did a lot with that type of thing,
yeah,
and it really helps set the mood. I feel like, and I a lot of that really it just I feel like I'm getting a really crisp image even 100 years later. So
yeah. No,
take
I
it or
mean
leave it.
the very last scene is them driving off at night, and the lantern's the last thing you get. So
Oh
that was
yeah.
I thought that I'm remembering you said lantern, and then that popped in. So
Um, we've talked about how the story was told a little bit, and maybe some of the choices. Whether or not they're the directors or not. Who in your opinion wins the movie?
hmm.
Does do the actors or the writers, or do we have F.W. Murnau? I would actually I think the most convincing performance is it's called City Girl. I actually think it comes down to, in my opinion, it comes down to Mary Duncan. I think she wins the movie. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I thought her performance was really good, and I mean the movie's geared for her, I think, and she does a great job with it. So yeah, I think it's Mary Duncan.
Yeah, I agree, buddy. I agree. Let's talk about themes, my friend. Anything there that stood out that you think is worth mentioning? I really enjoyed the idea about the grass isn't necessarily greener on the other side or the wheat not being golder on the other side.
Right.
Um, that is a common theme because I think so often we look at things and we tend to think that something is going to be a little bit better or the people there will be a little bit more respectful. And I mean, if you traveled enough, you know that there are pockets of places that seem to have, you know, every place has their stereotypes, right? They all
Yeah.
have we all have their type of profiling when it comes to people. But when you stay anywhere long enough, you kind of find out a little bit about yourself too. Like if you find yourself having similar problems everywhere you go, somebody once famously told me, or not famously, but once told me that if you have a problem everywhere you go, look in the mirror. You're probably the problem. And that's an interesting statement too. So any themes that stood out to you that you want to mention?
I think the biggest one here is the we already kind of covered with the grass is always greener. I think it's part of being human, but also it's enhanced by our American culture of that pursuit of the better, and the pursuit of happiness. I think that's the issue is we think of like the pursuit of happiness as being the pursuit of something better. So like we can never be content with where we're at. It's something I struggle with from time to time. I'm pretty good at being content, but even people who are content can have those thoughts sneak in. Um, and then the other one too here is the idea of just men being creeps keeps coming up more than I thought it was going to in some of these early films. So I thought it was interesting that. It was in both the city and the country. He was kind of, I don't know how big of a claim Morneau was trying to make about men, but he was definitely kind of pointing to this idea that it doesn't really matter where they're at. There's not a lot of good, good ones. So that was interesting.
Yeah, I'm starting to wonder, like, when was this like surge of women born into the world? Because the way these movies are being portrayed, you would think that for every 50 men, there's one woman, and that they just get drooly and bug eyed and wide eyed about like, oh my god, we have a common friend that we graduated with. His name is Transon Frederick. He's telling me a story about when he was in the military. He was stationed in Alaska, and that's where he was living. And he said that you literally would get into fist fights with other men to try to talk to be the first to talk to a woman because you'd be at a bar, which only have men, and then all of a sudden a woman would walk in and you're like, holy crap, where have you been? I haven't seen you in this small town before. And if you wanted a shot at a life after, outside of your little town, you would have these dilemmas that would exist. So to me, I'm like, is this happening this can't be happening in Chicago. This can't be happening in, but it tend to. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I was going to introduce Lulu to you.
Oh.
You want to come up here and say hi? No, Lulu doesn't want to say hi. But yeah, so I kind of thought that was interesting too, because you're right. Like we talked about 1929 being a very horny year. Well, we're already off to the races here in 1930. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's in Chicago. Maybe the men are just acting like that because that's how they act. But I think maybe out in the plains of Minnesota where the wheat's growing, it's kind of that military
yeah.
example there where you're limited in your options when your job is with 12 other laborers. So
Yeah, I forget what Barney called it on How I Met Your Mother, but like a mermaid effect or something. If you're working with someone long enough, people start looking good to you. So,
yeah.
Final thoughts and ratings on this movie. What was your final thoughts? I know we talked about how we enjoyed it. Like, where are you at with it, and what would you end up rating it?
Yeah, so I really like this. I was complaining about a couple things, but again, I think they're minor and like sometimes when you have a really good movie and you're looking for it to be just a little bit better, those small issues feel a little bit bigger. But yeah, I mean, I thought this was really well done, and the characters were actually likable, like the two main characters, and you wanted to see it work. So I think for me, this probably ends up in that four out of 5 stars.
Dude, I will say this. I agree with you. Both of the characters are extremely likable, right? And I do think that plays a part in these romance, because if you're doing a romance, you want to root for the couple to get together. I thought we were going to get swerved there for a second. I really did. I was starting to kind of have doubts on early day cinema because I thought she was going to end up with Mac there for a minute. I was oh no, we're going to get a Charlie Chaplin thing here where he can't leave his father, and I just was so afraid for it, but it did not end up going that route. Thank the Lord. So,
yeah, no kidding.
So you're going with a 4. You're potentially. I think I'm at a 3.5 or a 4. Here's the issue. I really enjoyed the movie. 3.5 is kind of like my baseline, right? It's like 3.5. I think it's a good movie. 3 would be something. There's something a little bit of an issue with it. I'm just looking for what's that next thing that took it to a 4 for me. I'm not sure we got there, but because there wasn't a lot of flaws either, I could see 3.5, 4 being where I land.
Yeah.
Let's ask a couple hard hitting questions.
All right.
And this is more like curiosity than it is, I think, like anything funny here. Do you remember the Scotland Yard movie, or not Scotland Yard, but the Blackmail?
Oh yeah, yep.
And do you remember the restaurant scene? You, me, and Dave kind of talked about it, how funny it was that they were fighting for a table, and even they'd be sitting down with like other people that they had no association with, just to kind of get a table. And now in this movie, we have men tapping other men on the shoulder because they're just patiently waiting for you to not even patient, like impatiently waiting for you to finish your food. What the hell is that? What is that how life was?
Yeah, well, I guess so. It seems like I don't know. Was there a lack of if you lived in the city where people just didn't have stoves? I mean, the microwave wasn't a thing yet, so maybe you just went out to eat, and so there was overpopulated restaurants.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I actually wrote, I can see why the restaurant host job was invented, just to kind of keep that chaos at bay.
Right.
Yeah. And then the other question I had basically was, did you like Kate's apartment? Would that be something you live in?
Man, see, you were saying that, and I was going to bring it up, but I didn't get a chance. I saw that as claustrophobic, right?
Oh yeah, the studio space.
It just felt a little too claustrophobic for me. I would need at least one other room.
Yeah. No, it's funny because I think I could do it. No problem. As a matter of fact, I know I could. I had a 3 bedroom. It wasn't really a bedrooms. You remember my apartment that I had? They had 3 big rooms. But all my
Yeah.
stuff was consolidated into one room anyways. So if you, I might want a little bit bigger space, but I could definitely pull it off.
Yep.
Let's get to the big questions here. Should this movie have been drafted?
Yeah, I think so. I feel pretty confident that this was one of the best 6 movies, so that we at least put on the table. Um, if we end up liking something from this era, I think it's worth drafting because I can imagine watching so many movies that just aren't good. Um, so
Yeah. Well, what was interesting is this because F.W. Murnau was so prevalent on this being a silent film that the odd part talky moments that they put into the film, um, I guess didn't work very well, and the word of mouth around the street was that this wasn't a very good movie for those that saw the part talkies, but those that saw the silent film liked it. But this movie ended up being a massive flop. It did not, as far as
uh,
making money at the box office, it didn't make very good money, and that was because of it. So, is it a rewatchable? Could you say, "Hey Molly, let's sit down dinner night, let's watch City Girl"?
oh, I don't think so. I feel like there's not. This isn't like Blackmail, where I feel like if you went back and watched Blackmail, you might be able to learn something about filmmaking. It feels more like just a he perfected is probably strong. It feels like a really good movie that you just don't need to see again. It's a
Yeah,
rom com
yeah,
in the end. Rom
yeah.
coms you just don't need to see again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, unless it's got something different that makes it stand out. Like I always thought 500 Days of Summer was a little bit different,
Mm,
right? There's a rewatchable quality to that movie because it's a rom com told in a different way. Um,
sure.
interesting.
Forgetting Sarah Marshall,
Yes.
another rom com.
You shall not pass.
I get die when he says in
I
Dracula's voice in my
cannot.
head all the time.
Die, I cannot.
So good.
um, is this a masterpiece?
No.
I didn't think so either. We move on, and it looks like on the docket, when we get to our next movie, our second movie in the year 1930, we are looking at one of your choices, Divorcee.
Hmm.
That's divorce with 2 E's at the end. April
Yeah.
19th, 1930.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty excited. I had IMDb pulled up here and ready to go, but it's been messing with my internet on my computer here. So, yeah, I mean, it sounds like a classic revenge tale where someone gets cheated on, so they go and two wrongs don't make a right, or maybe they do in this instance. It seems doubtful. This one, best actress, the lead Norma Shearer. So kind of dipping into that Academy Awards bucket that we like to do from time to time. So I'm excited to see how this one goes.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this too because this is where I'm really looking for the credibility of the Oscars here, the Academy
Mm,
Awards, right? Like, when do we get to a place where we actually start agreeing with the Academy Awards? Maybe there's just not a lot of things to choose from in the early days, or if there was, it could have been it could have been very political from the jump, right? But
Oh,
I'm
I'm sure it
excited to
was.
see how Norma's performance here, um, uh, plays out.
Right. Yeah, and it's another one of these adapted. It looks like it's based on a novel, so maybe that's something that we can that'll come up again.
Tagline, real quick, says when a woman discovers that her husband has been unfaithful to her, she decides to respond to his infidelities in kind. Ooh, one of those weird, mysterious statements. In
Mm.
kind. Uh, anything else for the good of the order, my friend, before we wrap this up and talk again next week?
No, I mean, we're into 1930 now. It's interesting. We've got kind of two romance relationship movies in a row, and then I think after that we've got two war movies in a row. So I'm just curious to see the differences here. If if the war movies are a little more serious than what we watch in these first two, it's just fun to kind of be on this ride. So
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The contrast of what we're doing, this is why when I picked up the phone call in the very beginning, Will, and wanted to do this with you, is because there's a wide range of things that we're interested in, and we're open to any genre.
Yeah.
As long as the story is there, right, or the acting is there, it's just got to have something there that we can hold on to. So I'm enjoying it too, my friend, and we'll talk about the Divorcee next week.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, everybody, keep watching movies. We'll see you then.
All right. See ya.